So, hi everybody on Facebook land. This is a really fun episode of Shires TV. We're going to be treating this as a panel and talking with some of our Shires artists on a great topic, orchestral trumpet playing. Our panelists run a pretty wide gamut, actually, of orchestras throughout the U.S., different positions, different roles, different locales. I thought it'd be really, really fun to get a little bit nerdy and talk about, you know, day in the life of a trumpet player who plays primarily in an orchestra. Right now, things are a little bit crazy, but the job is still in a lot of ways fulfilling, and there's still work to be done, even if you're not sitting in the orchestra right now. You'll see, if you're on Facebook and friends with any of these panelists, you'll see a lot of practice videos coming out, which is really cool to be able to see what they're working on in their spare time. But for tonight, I figured we could talk about how they got into the orchestras, what it's like to be in the group, what their practicing is like when they've got busy weeks. I'm sure we'll get geeky and talk about mouthpieces and equipment and all the burning questions that trumpet players always have. What's your favorite mute? So we can go through all of that, of course. And if you have questions, pop them in the comments below. I'll keep an eye on all the comments and we'll try to work them in. But we'd love to hear from you. So if you've ever had any questions about the audition process or anything, just let us know. We'll try to get to it. But without further ado, let me introduce the panelists. It's going to be really fun tonight. We have Emery Harvison, who's the assistant principal trumpet of the Phoenix Symphony. Waves. Hi, Emery. We have Kiradjieff, who is the assistant principal and third trumpet of the Cincinnati Symphony. And I spelled it right this time. Yep. We have Brynn Marchiando, who is associate principal trumpet and third trumpet of the New Mexico Phil and principal trumpet of the Santa Fe Symphony. And next to her is John Marchiando, who's principal trumpet of New Mexico Phil and also in Summit Brass and Trumpet Mundi and a bunch of stuff. And I'm sure we'll talk about that too. And last but not least, Rob Smith, who's principal trumpet of the Florida Orchestra.
And this is my wife, Laura. She also plays in the orchestra.
Of course, yeah.
She plays cello, and
right.
It's probably very good that we're both not trumpet players. I don't know. That's a question for John and Brynn.
It would never work.
It never works. Me and my husband.
She's along for the ride, but she makes me look good, so I'm happy for her to be here.
I met my husband at Shires selling him a trumpet, so I mean, I don't know.
Yeah. That's pretty good. That's pretty good.
So I'd love to turn it over to you guys. It'd be really interesting to hear a little bit about who you are and where you came from, and what your role is like in your prospective orchestra. So Emery, if I could start with you, just because going in alphabetical order is easier for me to manage.
Sure.
That would be great.
Sure. Hi, trumpeters. So thanks for joining us tonight. My name's Emery Harvison. I'm assistant principal trumpet with the Phoenix Symphony. My main position is second trumpet with the symphony, and then I'll also play assistant. I grew up in Louisiana, and I went to school at LSU for my undergrad. If anybody doesn't know, the LSU Tigers had the greatest football team in history past year, and looks like we're going to continue that championship season through this year too, at least with no football happening. But
right, yeah, reigning champs.
I did 2 degrees at LSU. I was on board to do music education the whole way. I was going to be a band director. Won a position with the Baton Rouge Symphony. My late in the year or my senior year, started to play with the faculty brass quintet. And somebody said, you know, you're playing okay. Maybe go study, give a shot, study your master's with Dave Hickman at ASU. So I ended up sending in my recital tape. He called a couple of weeks later, and yeah, I did my master's at ASU. And right after I finished that, I started my DMA because I hadn't won a job or didn't have a job yet, and that was kind of the next route to go. And about my first semester in the DMA, the position with the Phoenix Symphony opened up, and I took the audition and was lucky enough to win it, and really never had to move.
That's so great.
Yeah.
So you've been in the orchestra now for how long, Emery?
24 seasons.
24 seasons, wow. Okay. That's awesome. That's awesome. So next on the list is Chris. You're
Hey, players and fans. My name is Kiradjieff. I am from Cincinnati and one of I'm sure I'm not the only one, but extremely fortunate to work in your hometown and the only orchestra I ever wanted to play in.
Wow.
My dad was a violinist in the symphony. He played 49 years, and I was the symphony brat. I got lessons in town. I went to CCM, the conservatory here in Cincinnati, for my undergraduate, and I started a master's in Cleveland at CIM. And very, very luckily, fortunately, I got a job about halfway through that first year of master's study here in Cincinnati. So I got to come back home and never left. 23 years later, we just finished our early. We finished early, but we finished our finished my 23rd season with the orchestra. I do some teaching. I taught at Xavier University for about 12 years, and I went a different direction after that. I just teach a few students at home now. And they're probably listening right now. Hello, Strickers. Hope you guys are good.
I love this. It's great.
And just, very honored to be a part of this, and happy to be here.
That's awesome, Chris. Thanks so much.
Sure.
So we'll go over to the same square now for Brynn first, and then John, if you guys don't mind.
Yeah, of course.
Ladies first.
I am Brynn Marchiando. I actually do also play in my hometown orchestra. I grew up in Albuquerque.
Wild.
And I know, weird. And I went to DU, University of Denver, for my undergrad. And I'm not sure if I'm the only one on this panel, but I got my undergraduate degree in jazz performance. And then decided to get a master's at New England Conservatory in orchestral performance and studied with Charlie Schluter there. And it was the year after he quit playing in the orchestra, so I heard him play in the Boston Symphony at Tanglewood, Mahler 8, I think was the summer before. It was his very last season, and then got to study with him there, which was a really interesting, great. I recorded every single lesson, and I listened back and can remember the anecdotes. He's really great at bringing pedagogy from his personal experiences in the orchestra. So that was an awesome experience. And then after that, I came back to Albuquerque and was runner-up for the job that John won.
Oh, that's funny.
Principal in the orchestra, and because he was already, were you tenured as third?
At the time, I was not tenured.
Oh, okay. So, but in any case, since he moved up to principal, they needed someone to play third associate, and they gave me the position, and I think it was a year-long position at that point. Mm-hmm. And then I ended up keeping that position. And then over the years, that was like 11 years ago. And over the years, I've also picked up other work here in Albuquerque, principal in Santa Fe Symphony, principal in the Opera Southwest Orchestra, and anything else that calls. But it's a nice life, and you can piece some nice things together when you have a town like this. And I also have since then started teaching at UNM.
Right.
And right now, my current duties are running the second jazz band there, and playing in the faculty brass quintet.
That's awesome. And John, what's your story? What's your deal?
So I I grew up in Wisconsin, and I went to the University of Michigan, which has the most overrated football program in the NCAA. We'd like to think we're like LSU, but we're not. And so I got 2 degrees at the University of Michigan, studying with Armando Catala and Charlie Duvall, and then after finishing my degrees there, spent some time in Cincinnati, just freelancing and teaching. I had a large studio of students and played in the Northern Kentucky Symphony Orchestra and the Richmond Symphony Orchestra. Had positions in those 2 small per-service orchestras. And then I got a job teaching at the University of Toledo, and kind of fell in love with teaching. Kind of realized I was good at it and I liked it, and so I had an opportunity to go do a doctorate with David Hickman at ASU. And same thing, kind of like Emery. I sent him a tape and he called me back and said, "Yeah, come on out." So so I went out and finished my doctorate actually got the degree. I'm still amazed that I finished
And
it.
finished.
But if I can do a doctorate, you can do one. People out there, okay? Just know this, okay? So finished the degree, and then kind of decided I was going to look into getting a college teaching job. And then lo and behold, what's the first job I win after finishing my degree? An orchestra job with the New Mexico Symphony Orchestra, and which is the old NMSO, and it was the job for third associate. And so I moved up here and played half a season as third associate, and then John Dante, the principal trumpet at the time, got a job playing principal in Malaysia.
Right.
And so he left, and they appointed me to a 1-year position. And I played 2 years as acting principal, and then they had an audition, which I won. And so I've been principal in the orchestra for now 15 seasons. And then teaching also at UNM for about 15 years since I got here, and then along the way, because the NMSO and now NMP aren't necessarily full-time jobs in terms of pay, have pieced together other gigs. So Summit Brass and the Trauma Mundi and then we have our own Enchantment Brass Quintet here as well, that we as the faculty group, if you will, at UNM, and so have been able to piece together a nice career here in Albuquerque, and really enjoy it.
And Rob, you're last up on this list, but
Okay. Yeah, thanks. I grew up in Orlando. I'm now working in Tampa, Clearwater, St. Pete, which is,
this is the crazy.
not far. It's almost the hometown orchestra.
Wow.
Right.
And there was an orchestra where I grew up in Orlando at the time. It was called the Florida Symphony.
Mm-hmm.
That folded 20,
And
25 years ago, a long time ago.
Too.
But there is still an orchestra there. I mean, it kind of grew from the ashes, and it's it's honestly, it's a tough situation. It's Orlando is a commercial town, so this kind of thing, where you go to find your work, sometimes, the quality of the job depends on what kind of a place it is and the culture around there. But, Orlando's run by Disney. There's better work and better jobs and better paying jobs at Disney than there are in the Orlando Philharmonic.
Right.
But anyway, so that's where I grew up. And all my teachers said, I need to go study with Vince Chikowitz at Northwestern. And I need to go hear Bud Hurst with the Chicago Symphony. And so these guys were my, they were at the center of my heart and my mind and my soul as I continue to develop. Now, I'm probably imagine I'm the only one here that, if I was paying attention, I would know this already. I don't have a degree.
Okay.
I got gainfully employed full time before I had a chance to finish, and I just never finished.
Yeah.
There was 1 year I went down and worked a full-time job in Mexico City for a while at the Mexico City Philharmonic. And I was making good money, but there were some things about the job that I wasn't crazy about, and there was some strange politics, and it was just I knew that I didn't want to stay there.
Yeah.
And so I came back. I actually came back to Chicago, and I was going to enroll in classes the following season, and continue working towards my degree. I had finished, basically, I had 3 years under my belt already at Northwestern. And I had a disagreement with the Office of Admissions and the financial aid department on how financially capable I was. And because of my age, I was 6 months too young to get a substantial amount of scholarship money because I was poor, but my parents were not. And as far as I was concerned, as far as my parents were concerned, I was already on my own. I had already been working and making money, and I was back in Chicago. I did some freelancing and stuff, and maybe I delivered pizzas couple of nights a week, I mean, that's literally what and I mean, it wasn't expensive to live because I would shack up with other guys in a big house, and I mean, it just wasn't that complicated. But So that further study was put off another year. And in that year, I met Laura and we got married, and I moved back down to Mexico for a different full-time job down there.
Wow, that's wild.
So, yeah. And then it was, I'll try to make a long story a little shorter. Then we spent one season in Charleston, South Carolina. And honestly, that was really, really, really rough in terms of the financials. We got pregnant very shortly after we were married, and we had a son. Our oldest son was actually born in Mexico. And we were living in Charleston with an infant, and I won't even tell you how much money we made. It was very little, and it's unbelievable to me now when I think about it. So anytime my kids complain about being poor, you don't know poor, sorry.
Wow.
I mean, I was making $25 a service.
Yeah, wow.
This was back in 1983, okay, in Charleston, South Carolina. So it was rough. And I remember we had a quintet, and we did some gigging, a little bit of gigging, and this lady approached me at one of our engagements, and she was going to get married soon. She wanted me to play at her wedding. Okay, this is nice. I got a gig. And and I quoted her what I thought was an extremely reasonable price, and she was just driving a hard bargain. She talked me down to $50. And I felt so badly about that for months. I was just, this is what I'm worth, So I guess my message to other people that, you have to do some gigs that don't pay very well, and maybe the group isn't that great, but if you really want it bad, if you want this life,
right,
you keep plugging away and good things will happen, hopefully. I mean,
right.
It's an overcrowded field. We all know how hard it is. I went to Northwestern. We had a great trumpet studio, really talented trumpet studio, and a bunch of my friends who were really terrific players, just couldn't make it happen because,
Right.
One of them was, he was tired of coming in second or third at multiple auditions, and he eventually did something else. So it's really tough. But I would say this to anybody that wants to do music as a career: you first have to have that desire. It doesn't matter how talented you are and how much you practice. If you don't want it more than anything else, it isn't going to happen for you. So desire is first, talent is second, and then you got to put in the hard work and make the magic happen.
Yeah, man.
So anyway, it was the following year. We drove down with a 1-year-old baby in the car from Charleston. We drove down to Tampa, and we took the audition. And actually, when I say we, it's because there were actually 3 jobs open at the time: 2 cello positions, and the associate principal trumpet, which at the time was a 3rd trumpet position as well, 3rd and associate. And her audition was first. She won the cello job, so nobody can say that they hired her because of me.
No pressure, right?
So she won her audition. The next day I had the trumpet audition. I won that. So we've been here ever since. That's 36 years ago.
Wow, man.
Makes me
That's a crazy story. I mean, it definitely speaks to the tenacity that's required.
Yeah, and it's and I honestly, at this point, I can't, I have no regrets about still being here. I did take some high level auditions in different places. I never took a 2nd or a 4th trumpet audition, but I took some assistant principal and principal trumpet auditions. And I came, I won an audition out in San Francisco for assistant principal. I went and played for a couple of weeks, and the music director, Michael Tilson Thomas, he took all 30 days that he was allowed to decide he didn't want me.
Oh, wow.
and that's okay.
It's a process.
It's all good, because I wasn't a great fit for that section. But I am loving what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I get to make music the way I want to. My conductors are happy. I'm happy. My colleagues are happy. we work together to make really great things happen on stage, although it's been a while since I've been with my colleagues, and that hurts.
I know.
But it's a good life. It really is.
So, I mean, it is kind of interesting. Like, everybody's path is always a little bit different. College, not quite finishing college, doing a lot of gigging leading up to it, maybe winning an audition. You know, the audition process is definitely daunting. And we can talk a little bit more about that. But for each of you, like, how many auditions do you think that you've taken in your life at a professional level? Is it a lot? Did you come right out the gate and nail it for some of this stuff? I mean, it'd be very interesting just to hear the range from some of you. It makes the rest of us feel good. So
we just jump in, or do you have an
yeah,
order?
do it. No, just jump in. That's totally cool.
Before I won, I guess it's the only thing I've ever won. It was 9. It was my lucky number. But I started early. You know, I took a year off after I graduated from high school in 90. And I worked for a year and took lessons, and I started at CCM in 91. And my solo repertoire was limited. I wasn't going to be a recital player. I wasn't going to be a soloist unless the Haydn or the Hummel or something was asked for. All I wanted to do was play an orchestra. So I devoted my life to the excerpts. And so by 92, if you remember, there was a 4th utility opening in the New York Philharmonic. It was kind of a revolving door. People would win, or they would get there and they wouldn't be able to stay. And it was like, so that was my first audition was 92 for the Philharmonic.
Wow.
And, you know, it was, I had no idea. I wanted to know where I was going to stack with everybody else, you know, because from the beginning, my teacher was telling me, you have to separate yourself from the pack. This is, you know, separate the men from the boys. The good players can do this, you know, everyone can do this, you know. So I just wanted to see where I stood. And so I sent a tape into the Philharmonic in 92. And I'll never forget, I came home from school one night and I had one message on the machine. It was like midnight. And it was the personnel manager said, your tape got through the prelims. We're inviting you for the semis. And I eventually got to the second round of the semis there. And then it didn't work out, and that's fine. I was completely freaked out.
Can't imagine why.
You want to be freaked out in an audition. You want to be as comfortable as you can be. So, whatever that means. And then I think the next year, there was another open, and maybe it was 2 years later, 94. So I auditioned for the Met in 93, made the semis there, and then 94 again, the Philharmonic, got to the same place again. So, I mean, I had a taste of success. I had advanced at least. So I think then when I started graduate school, the first thing I told Mike Sachs, I said, okay, I've had some taste of success, fixed what's wrong. And, you know, he is a master, as we all know, and he had everything fixed inside of a few months. And I think within the course there, I think I may have auditioned there was a second in Pittsburgh. I can't remember where else, but Cincinnati was number 9. And I won, my first job there was a 4th utility, and it was a 1-year position. And then we auditioned for associate after that, and they didn't pick anybody. And then, the audition again was for the job I have now, the 3rd assistant principal, utility / job. And so I had to tell people I auditioned 3 times. I had to win twice to get the orchestra, but kind of funny. But
who's counting, really?
Right. I was counting. But you know, I've heard a lot of different numbers from people, and I just consider myself extraordinarily fortunate. You know, you have to do your work. You have to work hard. You have to devote your life to it. You know, and you just kind of hope you get a taste of what you want. And so, 9 was my lucky number.
Nice. And Emery, what about you? What was your process like?
Yeah, I was lucky enough to win the first major audition that I took in Phoenix. So it was like I gotta do it. The pressure was huge. My daughter was just 1 year old, and so we were living off of ramen noodles and like hardly nothing in grad school and everything else. And so I was bound and determined. There's no sleeping, nothing involved except trumpet playing and learning it. I still was pretty convinced I didn't know how the hell to play the trumpet, but I ended up advancing. Chris Martin and I were in the finals for that audition, and we slowly just it was a long audition, but ended up playing with the principal trumpet, Chuck Bergens, where we both played with him. And I'd always figured, or I always felt comfortable that given just a few minutes, I could match whoever I was playing with really, really comfortably. And so as far as for a second trumpet player, it was a really, really natural fit. I had subbed in the symphony with the Phoenix Symphony. So Chuck knew me, and as soon as I thought, well, it's down to me and Chris Martin, he's one of the best trumpet players in the world, but I don't think he's a second trumpet player at this point. He wants a principal job. So when it got to there, I was pretty confident that I could win that sucker if I didn't screw it up. And then the rest of my thought processes where I usually only took auditions where I actually felt comfortable where I wanted to live. So I really, really hate cold weather. And I ended up taking an audition in Chicago because everybody was saying you might as well just get up there and do that. I did well. I advanced through one round for, I think it was the Chicago third. But the rest of my auditions, I auditioned in Dallas for, there was a second trumpet position there that I advanced to the finals. And then the principal trumpet auditions, I advanced, but where they didn't pick anybody until they asked Orion.
Right. Okay.
So, and then I'm terrible with dates, but about 5 or 6 years ago, I was one of the final three with the LA Phil for the third position. So still banging away a little bit, but at this age, I'm very comfortable in Phoenix, even though there's no symphony playing anywhere right now.
Right. I know. This is all, of course, a little bit funny with everything going on, but it's still pretty inspiring to hear like all these stories. And there are still a lot of people who are going to be headed back into school come fall, or people who are going to be on the audition circuit when things start up again. Of course, I mean, it's nuts. So, John and Brynn, what were your numbers? How many places?
I'm probably the opposite. I probably have taken the most auditions of anybody in this panel.
Because we kind of heard some of Rob's.
I'm probably around between 50 and 60 auditions that I took. And I would say for most of those, I probably shouldn't have been auditioning. I didn't know what I was doing. I had not figured out what I needed to do on trumpet. And I was hammering in the practice room in a way that was not productive. I didn't know how the excerpts go. I had not done that work the way that you need to. And it was when I started working with Dave Hickman that I figured out the playing things. And it could apply then what I had learned from my teachers, Charlie Duvall and Amar Nukatalam, for the music to go, oh, that's how I do that. And at that point I started advancing. I was in the finals for LA Phil 3 times. They didn't hire once, and then I lost to Jim Wilt and Chris Dill. So, if Jim Wilt doesn't show up, maybe I'm playing in LA Phil. But no, and I actually have the pleasure that I lost an audition to both Chris and Emery as well.
That's great.
I was at those auditions that you won, and so, but it took a while to figure it all out. And as a college professor, as someone who teaches full time as well right now, I think the biggest problem with people when they don't advance is because they don't know the excerpts the way they're supposed to be played. And that is the thing I work on most with students when they're saying they want to be orchestral players is, okay, well, you play trumpet really well, but you're not playing the excerpt the way it goes. Who taught you that? and so that is a big reason. Anybody who advances in auditions can play the horn. That's a given. But there is also a way this music goes, and I had not figured that out because I couldn't play the trumpet the way I wanted to.
Interesting.
It was a long grind, and you get to a place where you finally figure it out, and when they call your name, it's the greatest feeling in the world. It really is.
Second to marrying your better half and.
Well, yeah. I mean, who are you?
I don't know.
Yeah. I would pay for that one.
You are going to pay for that one.
We have a comfy couch.
Yeah.
Fine. Do that.
My story is a little bit different, and it might be more applicable to people who are looking to move somewhere and freelance, because I've actually never won an audition. I was runner-up, like I said, to John winning principal here in the New Mexico Symphony, which, by the way, the New Mexico Symphony folded in 2011 and became the NM Phil. That's why there's two different names. And then I had a personal private audition for the maestro after the 1 year was up, and he said, "Yep, you can have it," you know.
Oh.
And then in Santa Fe Symphony, it was a sort of similar situation. They needed principal, and I was playing year in and year out. And then finally they said, "Yeah, you're just the person," you know.
Wow. Okay.
So yeah, it was an interesting journey. But my advice would be, like, you know, play really well and be really nice. If you can do those two things, you will get ahead in this business. And unlike other careers where you can just be really nice maybe and not be so great and kind of still get ahead, you have to do both in this one. Yeah. And probably in like the more typical auditions, you can't show that you're easy to work with or cooperative or a really great second player, you know, because you just have the opportunity to play alone on a stage by yourself, which is not the job, and I think is really weird. But yeah, so you kind of have to put playing your best first, and then be really easy to work with after that. So, but after I came here, I probably took another half a dozen auditions, but I was so kind of invested in this place with having met John and having my current job. I was just like, you know, this is really good. You know, it doesn't have to be the best of the best of the best. For me, it didn't have to be the best. It just had to be great and stable, and that's what we have here. So
it's pretty inspiring stuff. Pretty awesome. Rob, you were giving us a little bit of info about you, but what was your number? Because I know that there was a bunch.
It would take me a while to
tally it. That's
an
fine.
accurate number. I'm going to say it's about a dozen auditions.
Okay.
Probably before I got the job that I have now. And, you know, I have an interesting distinction. I'm not real proud of it, but it is what it is. As many of you know, Chicago Symphony took an awful long time and many auditions for principal trumpet to fill that job. And I took the first 4 of those principal trumpet auditions.
Right.
I think there may have been 5 or 6 all together, but I took the first 4 of them, and I actually advanced to what they were calling finals on 3 of those. You know, the interesting thing, this goes into a little bit into audition psychology, which I'm definitely not an expert at, because I had some problems with this. And I even, you know, recently another trumpet player contacted me, and he wanted me to train him on the psychological aspect of, you know, auditioning well. And I told him straight up, I'm not your guy, because I haven't done this very well. Because I can tell you this, on that very first principal trumpet Chicago Symphony audition, I thought, well, I have to take the audition. I have to go, and I'd love to play on that stage again, but I don't really think I'm qualified. That was my mindset.
Right.
And I played my preliminary, and not only did I advance, but I heard through the grapevine that some of the committee members were really excited about my playing, you know, when they figured out who number 16 was, you know. And then I started, oh my goodness, this, you know, I can't do this. And I never played that well again that I did for that first preliminary audition. I never played that well again.
Wow.
Up on that stage, even though I advanced 2 more times.
That's interesting.
And I remember it was another one of those times when I went up there, and I played my preliminary, and it was tight and it was sloppy and it really wasn't very good. And I had kind of a funny thing. I'm a lifelong coffee drinker. Okay, just to set, this is kind of a foundational part of the story here. And for a while, when I took an audition, I decided that I would do, as part of my preparation protocol, I would avoid caffeine for a week so that I wouldn't have jitters, I wouldn't be nervous, yada, yada, yada. So I go up and I play this audition, hadn't had any coffee in a week, and I felt okay. I mean, I had maybe a dull headache for a couple of days, but it wasn't a big deal. And I played my audition. It wasn't very good. It honestly wasn't very good. I was missing notes, I was cacking, it was just not very consistent. And so I figured, well, that was a wasted audition. So I put my trumpet away and I went out of Orchestra Hall. I went around the corner to the Artist Cafe, and I treated myself to a big breakfast, including a huge mug of very strong coffee. And I took about, I don't know, probably 45 minutes, and I went back to the hall, you know, to get the bad news and to pick up my stuff and get on with my day. And the personnel manager says, well, you got 5 votes out of 9, but they required a super majority of 6 votes to pass to the next round. And she said, well, if you want, I can give you a new number and you can go audition again.
Wow. Okay.
Okay. All right. So I did it again. And this time I've got the caffeine that I've been off for a week coursing through my veins, but so much of the stress had already been relieved that I played much better the second time. And I passed on to the next round, and
That's
went up there another 6 weeks later or whenever it was for the final round, and I didn't get anywhere. But
my question is, you cut out the caffeine for a week, but did you cut out beer? Because that's going to be, for many of us, the
beer. No, I wasn't drinking beer either, but you know, I would have this to say also. If you have something special to say in your music making, don't be too quick to condemn your chances if something doesn't go well on stage. I mean, and that story that I just told you is a perfect example of that. I was really unhappy with it, and I was sure there's no way I was going to pass on to the next round. But a number of them wanted to hear me again, and I was able to go out and play better the next time. Another example of that was, this probably happened a couple of years early. I mean, actually, this probably happened 6 or 7 years earlier. I forget. It was one of my earliest auditions. It was probably 1982 or 83. There was a principal trumpet audition in the Seattle Symphony, and I think Charlie Duvall won that one. Mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure he won that audition, but I remember going up there, and this was the year after I was in Mexico the first time, and there was another fellow there whose name was Carl, and I had met him down there. He was an American playing in a different Mexican orchestra, but we met up, and he had been eavesdropping on all the auditions going on stage, you know, going into the stairwell or something and listen to people play. And he said, man, I've heard 3 guys play note perfect auditions and none of them passed. I don't know what this committee's looking for, you know. And so that kind of set the stage for my little experience. I went up there and I had what must have been a very exciting audition, but it was kind of sloppy. I missed some, I really had some big clams come out, things that did not go as intended, but they passed me on. They wanted to hear me anyway. Apparently, I mean, I know one of the things I did right was I really pasted the high E flat on Mahler 8.
Well, I mean, how are you not going to advance if that's the case? But
you know, and it doesn't hurt to paste the high note, but still, no. I was unhappy with the audition, but they wanted to hear me again anyway.
It's definitely a good point.
And I'll tell you another one. Just you know, it's same.
Just real quick, because we have a couple questions I do want to get in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Real quick, for my first audition in Tampa here, where I won, I was playing the at one point in the finals round, I was doing the offstage solo to Pines of Rome, and a couple of notes didn't come out right. It was pure flub, and okay, put it behind you. Just forget about it. Just keep making music. You know, when we get upset, when things don't go well, that's our ego that's getting in the way. You know, so it's not about me right then. It's about the music. Just, you know, so anyway, so I won the audition. Anyway, so these same ideas. So that's all I'll say about that.
No, that's a good point. That's a good point. So we had a question that was written talking about like your role, your job in the orchestra. Can you talk about different roles within an orchestral trumpet section and how to execute each position's responsibilities well? So it's really interesting because there are some similarities in this panel, and there are some people who do totally different things. So maybe we can start with Chris, and then we can like kind of work our way through the group and just kind of add in on what your thoughts are about roles within the trumpet section.
Sure. Yeah. When I first got in, I was fourth utility for a year, and so I was playing fourth. I was playing third when the associate was playing principal, and I was playing second on the concertos, a standard utility position. And then it was third assistant principal. And ironically, I played very little assistant principal.
Okay.
I may have assisted maybe 2 or 3 times in many, many years. It just wasn't, you know, the associate here will do the assisting. And so, you know, I would say, other than, you know, getting the only job I ever wanted, I have one of the best job descriptions because I have played principal on really good stuff. I have played second, I played third, I played fourth, I played offstage. I've been able to do it all. You know, when in a lockdown position, and it's, you know, not the case here, but our second trumpet would say 90% of the time he plays second trumpet. You know, he has moved up to play some principal, some associate, he's played some offstage, that kind of thing. But that's one of the more colorful jobs, if you will, of being an associate player or a utility player here. And I have had, you know, things from, you know, principal on, you know, youth concerts. Years ago, we would do a split in the summer. Half the orchestra would go out to our summer home at Riverbend, and the other half would be at the opera. And, you know, I thought I would rather spend my summer in the air conditioning, so I'd always sign up for opera.
That's funny.
The other 3 guys were out of Riverbend, right? So not only was I playing in air conditioning, but I was principal, and I got to put the section together of people I knew I could play with, you know, and, you know, highlights of that, I played principal on Salome, principal on Electra, things I will never, ever, probably ever get again. And, you know, probably nobody in my section or, you know, could say that too. So, I mean, I've gotten pieces like that in the utility position. But it took, for me, it took years to undo the, as it's been called, first itis. You know, when you're in college, you're playing all the excerpts, you want a principal job, so that's kind of how you're playing. And it seemed like in my day, there wasn't a lot of strategy. You know, this is a second job, so I'm going to play like a second player. This is a fourth job, so I'm going to play like a fourth player. Maybe a guy named Steve Witzer played trombone in Cleveland when I was there. And I remember lots of good advice from Steve. And one was, your audition is a 10-minute recital. And so I came from studying with principal players. So that's the type of job I wanted. I played everything as if it was a principal part, you know, because in an audition context, I have taken more than I've been on committees for. Thank God. It's not a great place to be on the other side of the screen. And, you know, back in the day, when I was auditioning, they said everyone had a book and you would play the first 3 notes of pictures and it wouldn't be right. Everyone would open their book and just start to, you know, turn pages. Now it's the cell phone. Cell phones come out, you know. So the big bit of advice I was given, and I tell students and whoever comes to play for me, is grab your listener right out of the gate. You need to separate yourself from everyone.
Yeah.
Whether it's character, it's style, I think that's the goods. In an orchestral audition, like John was saying, it's about how the excerpts go, it's character and style. And I think that's like the most important thing. So where my learning curve came is I didn't get a principal job. So I just wanted to do my best, and what I knew of was my best was to play third trumpet or fourth or second like a principal player.
Right.
And that doesn't jive. And I had some great conversations with great colleagues, and they were all, I often refer to it as them house training a puppy. I was 23 and out of school and at a big job, and I think the lowest tenured member at that point was like 10 years, and then other people were at 30 plus years, and the guy comes in with no experience at all, and so they were definitely house training a puppy. And so I got great advice with, sometimes you don't have to stick out. Sometimes they don't have to hear you across the county. Sometimes you're supposed to blend. Now you're supposed to come out. So having that, I think if I taught at a conservatory, I think that I would definitely give that to students and people who do teach. I would recommend, grab your listener, dazzle them, because that's what they're going to remember. And they're going to hear 200 people, and you're a number. So they have to remember you somehow. Yeah. And when I've been on the other side, I'll like put stars and like, I'll write something like, remember this one. This one was good. Because, and you have to grab them in order for them to remember something like that. So I think I've lost track of where I was.
No, I mean, it's really interesting.
It's like the times that I've gotten some principal time and experience, it was great because I could just tap into the instincts I learned long ago instead of what I had to unlearn, So I felt a lot more free, if you will. It can be constricting in a section if you're not used to. So it's great. You have to be able to do all of it. But I think for an audition, you get to the final round and you're playing with sizzle and you're grabbing everybody. The committee can say, "We love it. Tone it down. Show us what you can do in this kind of context." And then you have to, downshift, adjust, and then go.
Sure.
And then you're going to get a well-rounded musician, which is what they all want.
Right.
Because when I was in the section, I was given big first trumpet solos to play, like on Pops concerts when everybody was wasted, and I'm down here, in the basement playing. Okay, he's fresh, so give him something. It's like, okay, you got to be able to again tap into that first trumpet. Soloist, you got to stand. You're standing up. You got a spotlight on you, and so you got to be able to do it all. But it's important to know when to do what and where.
Yeah. No, it makes sense. I mean, it definitely makes sense. And Emery, you're in a kind of similar position in terms of jumping around a little bit. Assistant, you said second as well. How do roles work for you in the orchestra? Like, what's your thought behind your role versus the principal player versus?
Yeah, I've always been incredibly comfortable about knowing what I need to do with my part, in more of a team player. I'm incredibly comfortable understanding that where my part fits in. If I've got a third trumpet player, I've got a fourth trumpet player, and we're really supporting that first trumpet player when it comes to some big blow, and that we're not trying to overpower anybody. When you win your audition, almost everybody, doesn't matter what audition you're taking, most of the excerpts are going to be for principal trumpet at the very beginning. You make it through the first round, you make it to the second round, all of a sudden maybe a couple of second trumpet excerpts show up, or third trumpet, right? It's almost not until that final round that where they want to find out if you can actually play the position that you're doing. So it's incredibly important to take on that aspect of being an accompaniment role when you need to, that you can't be playing principal from those positions. The one thing that I've noticed throughout my career is that the unfortunate people that have come and gone that win the job and don't get tenure, to me, it almost always falls not on the big pieces that are so famous that we all know we can play in our sleep, but it actually falls in the new pieces, or more importantly, the concertos. Mm-hmm. When your maestro is on the stage and you're sitting there and you're playing the violin concerto, you're playing second trumpet, right? And all you're supposed to do is just play a low A in octaves with your first trumpet, or something like Schumann, anything that if you would do it and you would look at it and go, there's nothing to this, right? And all of a sudden the conductor looks at you and it's time to go. It's those little hiccups. Did you forget that you had to learn how to play soft, all of those little things. And to me, being on committees, that's what the conductors home in on. They never say, well, he missed a note in Petrushka, right? It was like, why was that so out of tune? And why wasn't he playing soft there, right? He can't play soft. That's it. I'm not advancing for another year, right? We'll audition somebody else. So I think that's what everybody really, really overlooks as far as that accompaniment aspect of your playing. If you blow the walls down, you better be able to play pianissimo also, or you will get caught with your pants down.
I like how everybody's like nodding their heads and laughing and stuff.
I might add to that I might add to that. I actually had the great pleasure to play second to Emery for a season in the Phoenix Symphony when Chuck Bergens took a sabbatical, and Emery moved up to principal, and I was asked to play second for the season. And he's right about the soft stuff, and we had a blast that year. And I distinctly remember mostly the soft things we did together.
That's so funny.
Especially that Shostakovich 6 where my mute popped out of the horn.
Greatest mute drop in history.
Yeah. No, we have to tell this story real quick. But we're playing. So we're playing Shostakovich 6, and we were doing a Coffee Classics concert Thursday morning. So the night before in rehearsal, Emery says, "Hey, can we try this with foams on a trum corps?" And I said, "Sure, I'll bring my trum corps and foams." And we did it before the show that morning, backstage to test it. It was going to be great, and said no problem. So I put my mute.
Been over us all week saying that part was too loud.
Right.
Ya Ling, I think.
Yes, correct. And
he was like getting mad about it.
Yeah, well, and that morning he was sick as a dog too. So I put my mute in before the lick. It's in the first movement. This really soft fanfare in the distance, and it comes, and as I'm lifting my horn, my mute, because it has the foams, doesn't fall out. It shoots out. And it hits my stand, makes a loud sound. This is like the softest point in the symphony too. Hits my stand, lands on the riser, falls off the riser, and makes all that racket between. And so I'm like having a stroke on stage, and I'm wondering what to do. And Emery just calmly pops his mute out, and we played it open, nailed it, open. I don't know if the maestro, he was so sick he might not have even noticed it, but and we finished the lick, and I put my horn down, and Benny Nguyen, the third trumpet player, tears streaming down his face. He's laughing so hard. I look down the trombones. I look down the trombone section. They're all doubled over laughing, And I'm like thinking, I have cemented my place in the Phoenix Symphony history with this mute drop.
And they still talk about you.
Apparently. Well, John Lofton in Summit tells me that it's still the best mute drop he's ever seen. So.
It's so great. It's so good. It's totally true too. My gosh. Well, I do want to just hit everybody else real quick. In terms of roles, like Brynn, you do an interesting thing because you're playing some of these dual roles in the orchestra, but then also in Santa Fe, you're principal. So how do you think about also jumping between different roles and also going between orchestral to the opera stuff so quickly? I mean, that's a totally different role too.
I think I'm coming at it personality-wise and experience-wise kind of the opposite of what Chris said, in that I don't feel like I'm a principal player first. I've always been a more supportive, kind of behind the scenes, real busy, but like to be kind of just back here. I always played defense in soccer. They tried to get me on offense, and I'd go back behind midline. No, I got this, So learning how to play principal was a really important thing, and having that inner voice of what you want to sound like, that was a really important thing for me. And I feel like I'm finally feeling comfortable in that role, whereas I was kind of faking it till I made it, for a long time. But you sort of have to do that. And then the other thing I'll say, in Phil, playing with John, we have the added complexity that we're also in a romantic relationship, and so if you're super close or news
Exactly
too,
from here.
if you're super close friends with somebody or, have some sort of like extra baggage like that also, is sort of hard to understand your roles. And luckily we're able to kind of go into it with a business standpoint. Like,
Yeah.
I'm playing second this week, I'm playing third this week. Sometimes I play first and he plays second. And, that's more rare. And so that we don't have a lot of practice in that. But I think in general, if we can make it about the music, right? It's still always about the music, and not let your ego get into it, as I think maybe Robert said. The ego is the problem a lot of times. So I think that has been an interesting journey for us too. Do you have anything to add on?
I would just say it's been fun to sort of have us both figure out our voices as principal players.
Yeah.
I had spent many years playing second and third prior to getting the job in New Mexico, and I had to find my voice as a principal player again too. And so I think it's interesting for us because we both kind of know what each of us expects for the section sound now, because so when I go play, I don't play much in Santa Fe anymore because I don't have time, but when I do, I know what she wants now, and I go in and I change my playing to fit what she wants.
Yeah, and I think it's important to know, to like ask questions. If you're playing second to someone you've never played with, say, how would you like the balance on this octave? For example, sometimes the first player will like you to match completely. Sometimes they want you to play louder. Sometimes they'll want you to take, stuff that's in unison down the octave if it's, in classical stuff.
Right.
And you just want to be communicative and show that you're paying attention. It doesn't all have to be radar, although having a good radar is really important too. But like, talk to them, see what they want you to do, and if they have a clear idea of what they want you to do, then you got a leg up too.
Yeah, it's a super good tip. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So principal playing, and Rob and John, you can both speak to this, as can obviously everybody on this panel, but like as your primary role. Rob, you were kind of alluding to some of it earlier, just with the mentality behind it, and also the strength that's required, but also the technique and the finesse too. Like, what's your thought about that?
Right. Well, I guess the first thing I would have to say about principal playing is it is primarily not a mechanical work that you have to do. It is creative. It is very creative, because if you don't have a absolutely brilliant idea in your mind, and I like to say, I like to tell my students and my colleagues, I say, I try to sound like the best trumpet player who's never existed. I mean, of course, Bud Herseth was my role model. Bernie Edelstein was another one that I really loved as a young player. So those are two guys that really knew how to get the job done and show us something really special. Honestly, my imagination is bigger than that. As awesome as those guys were, and it's got to be so good. This idea, the concept has to be so brilliant and so well defined that you will never reach it. But if you come close, it's going to be really good. And so anytime you're playing principal trumpet, whether it's full-time principal or whether you step in once in a while, you have to turn that imagination on, and you have to be completely confident, and you have to approach it like there's no way I can miss it. And then when you miss it, you forget about it.
Yeah, right.
Just like, there's no way I can miss this, and it's gonna be great, and you have to be kind of crazy in that way. You just have to you have to be absolutely fearless. Now, I by the way, I have really deep respect for every position that is performed, and every player that performs those positions, because it's really important. The second job, a great second player will make a principal player sound better every single time, because if they are really well matching in terms of style and timbre and volume and articulation, I mean, it makes the principal sound better. And Brynn was mentioning about, how do you manage dynamics? Well, I prefer, like, let's say, I mean, on a wide swath of repertoire, not just Beethoven and Mozart, but on a wide swath of repertoire, I like the second player to play just a little more than I am, because it actually, there's this wonderful commingling of frequencies in the air, sound waves, and a blend happens that and there's a sound that now is coming out of my bell that I cannot produce by myself. It's impossible.
That's interesting.
I mean,
Yeah.
even if I really like the sound that I'm making, when the second player, if the job the second player is doing is really outstanding, I sound even better than I did before.
That's awesome,
I
actually.
mean, it really is.
Yeah.
And honestly, I have to say this. I know we've got a lot to talk about, but I think the most difficult job, it doesn't pay the best, but the most difficult job is anybody, whether it's an assistant or an associate, if they play second or third and then have to play first. I think that's really tough, because when you're playing principal trumpet, your base, your anchor is the high register, because you're up there all the time. And, so if you do enough low register work that you're at least competent now there, if not excellent, then you're in good shape. But man, when you spend all this time playing in the gutter, and then, okay, now you got to play lead. Ooh, that's tough.
Yeah.
And I mean, I mean, not just that, but it's just the general skill sets of following rather than leading. Every year I've been spending maybe 4 or 5 weeks down in Naples when I've got a week off, or I can take a week off if I'm not excited about the programming that week or something. And I go down and I play with Matt Sonneborn in Naples.
Nice.
He's a principal player there. And it gives me a chance. I mean, a lot of times it's third, sometimes it's second. And boy, I get to practice a whole new skill set doing that. And I really enjoy it. It's really great. But I'll tell you something else. I mean, usually I'm staying in a hotel, and honestly, I don't get a lot of practice done that week. And after that week, I've been playing second or third to Matt. It takes me it's not a huge problem, but it takes me about 2 hours of very specialized practice to feel like, okay, I'm a principal trumpet player again, because I gotta do a little reset with the first.
Right. Yeah.
I know what I'm doing, so it's not an emergency. It doesn't like take me 3 days to get back.
No, but it makes sense. Like you said, a skill set. I mean, it's a practiced thing.
Every position has its unique challenges.
Yeah. Yeah. And John, like, you're the other principal player in this group. I mean, I think you were nodding with a lot of stuff that Rob was saying.
Yeah, I agree a lot with what Robert just said, that, this is, I'd like to have a second player who is I don't know if I want to say louder than me per se, but just playing with as much vibrance in their sound as possible, so that I feel there's something I can kind of rest on. But yeah, it's I have the added duties of doing what I do, playing in Trauma Mundi and
Right.
brass quintet on a fairly regular basis, where and then also having to be a recitalist and playing solo recitals and things like that. It's actually the job I'm in is perfect for that, because I don't have weekly concerts with my orchestra. And so I can take time to do those other things and still be able to practice my repertoire for the orchestra as I need. It's I think our positions in our orchestra are somewhat unique in that it's a despite being a now 8-year-old orchestra, it's still pretty young, but in terms of its development, and that's partially due to the community we live in is taking time to come back, but and so where the NMSO was, a 75-year-old orchestra by the time it folded, it was a much more busy orchestra in the state, and I would not have to be able to possibly be a full-time professor like I am now. So,
Sure.
but But so I think this that's what's hard about winning orchestra jobs is the skill set for every position is so different, and so and do you get to show that skill set in an audition is another thing. I mean,
Right.
so it's I know the reason I won the job in the NMSO all those years ago was because of the fact that I could switch between playing principal and third. The section round, in the final round, they had us play Shostakovich 5, the march from the first movement, and they had me play third, which great, fine, know it, and then they said, okay, can you come do it now and play first? Sure, great, know it, and I was able to show that I could do both.
Yeah.
And I know for a fact that's why I won the job.
Yeah.
But I was lucky. I had played both first and third on that symphony several times, so so I could do that. But and so if you have that burning desire to be a principal player, then learn the principal skill set. But if you have a burning desire to be a section player, the skill set is much broader in a way, because you're going to have to do both. You're going to have to play in a style of playing in a lead way, principal way, but also have to play in a supportive way. And so that's why it's so hard to win these jobs sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. We had a couple questions that were written in, and maybe we can treat it like a little bit of a lightning round, just because I don't want to keep you guys here all night. We're a little bit past 9 already, but we're covering some really fantastic stuff. But maybe we can just go around the panel really quick and just, a couple words here and there. But if you could let us know your favorite orchestral album, and also your maybe your top trumpet playing mentor. If anybody's ready, I know those are tough, but
my mentor is definitely Dave Hickman, without question.
Yeah.
I felt like I was learning to play the trumpet when I got to ASU, and literally in our first lesson for my master's, I played something for him, and he sat there for 10 seconds, and he looks at me and he goes, "If you're going to make it, you need to learn how to play the trumpet." And I thought, holy shit.
Such a Dave thing, too.
Like that, right? But, in learning, and it didn't take me long to understand exactly what he meant. So Dave, and boy, I don't know if I have any favorite recordings. I mean, some of the stuff I've heard Mike Sachs do in the LA Phil with so many different players.
Yeah.
I love it all. It's hard to throw a dart and say that's my best.
Yeah, makes sense. Anybody else ready with these two important?
I'd say I'm going to echo what
Emery
said about Dave Hickman. Same thing. My very first lesson, I finished playing a Charlier etude, and I played kind of conservatively because I was like, I don't know him that well, and I finished, and he said, "Is that how you really play that?" I said, "Well, no, I'd probably be more daring." Okay, good. I was about to kill myself.
Oh my God.
But yeah, and what Dave taught me was to think more outside the box in terms of music style, and that was, but he'd also right away pinpointed what my technical issues were. You can't do this here, do this to fix it.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Oh, okay. And within weeks, I I was on the path to repair, and so I would, Dave is, same answer. I think so many great records out there. I tend to lean towards listening to the old Boston Symphony recordings with Armando Catala, just because of my affinity and love for the man as my first mentor as an undergraduate student, and he had so many different hats he wore as an orchestral player and a soloist, which is rare for the major symphony orchestra players.
Yeah.
And so I tend to lean towards any of those Catala recordings, but particularly the Pines of Rome. So
good stuff, man. Anybody else got to answer it?
Well, I would say one mentor is hard. I've got two. My two main teachers, Phil Collins was in Cincinnati, my first teacher, and then Michael Sachs. Phil Collins was a master at many things, and one of the most beautiful sounds on the trumpet that you've ever heard, if we all know, is playing. And that was one thing he instilled. Always play with the best sound possible, whether it's super loud or super soft, the sound, accuracy, intonation, all that stuff. So that I take with me every time I pick the trumpet up. And I'm, I could be, I could be missing a ton of notes, but if the sound is okay, I'm all right. I can go back and fix that, And then obviously Michael Sachs, my first lesson, I was coming into graduate school. I had taken auditions. I was like ready to knock this guy's socks off. And he says, yeah, why don't you play me a low G? I'm thinking about, so what does he want to hear this for? But okay, I couldn't play a low G. I'm like, okay, this is why he's asking me to do it, because I can't do it. And so, he put the nuts and bolts, found them. He showed me where the store was to go buy them, and then he put the machine together.
Wow.
Those are my two top mentors that I had personal contact with. Listening to Herseth on recording in the orchestra, listening to Phil Smith with the Philharmonic and orchestra. I mean, those were my my goals to get. I mean, I could never match it, obviously, but that's at least where I wanted to go with that. But it's tough to lock down one. I mean, if you pick a piece and say, what's your favorite recording of this piece, that might be a little bit easier. But to mark it down to one, it's really tough.
I think the point is just listening in general is just such a huge tool that we have as musicians.
Right. Because that's where it gets back to learning. If you haven't had the experience doing it on the job, if you've listened to it, at least you kind of know how it goes.
Right.
And like I said, that's the goods in an orchestra job, is knowing how it goes. Rarely you're going to pick the best player who has no idea what they're doing. I mean, it happens, I guess, maybe somewhere, but it's, you need to know. So.
Yeah, for sure. Rob, what about you? Who is your top mentor, and what's your
this is going to be a little strange answer. I'll go through it quickly, I promise. Tom Wohlwender I studied with in high school, and he and Bernie Edelstein joined the Cleveland Orchestra at the same time. Tom was second trumpet, and Bernie, of course, was principal. And I didn't know Bernie then, but I knew to know him and love him late in his life, and he's gone now. He's been gone for several years. But what a wonderful man, and what an amazing trumpet player. So, Tom Wohlwender and Bernie were my first mentors, and of course, Vince Chikowitz, he was there for me at a really kind of a vulnerable part of my life. I was doing a lot of self-doubt, and he really got me to understand that I had what it took to be good, and maybe even to be great. And then, of course, Bud Herseth. I never took a lesson with Bud, but I sat in that first balcony for many dozens of concerts over several years, and just like, okay, this is music making. This is, it's not just, it went way beyond trumpet playing. It was just amazing. And if I have to pick a favorite recording, it's a toss-up between the Mahler 7. I don't remember who the conductor was. It might have been a Botto, Chicago Symphony, a Bud Herseth, and then the Miraculous Mandarin with Reiner conducting.
Nice.
The lyrical playing is matchless.
Yeah.
My computer is about to die, so I'm gonna go plug it in real quick.
All right. Yeah.
If you lose me, that's why. Sorry.
Okay. And it's okay. And Brynn, what about you? Your biggest mentor and your favorite recording?
I'd say my mentor is my first my undergraduate teacher, Alan Hood at DU.
Yeah,
he's amazing at both jazz and classical playing, and I think being a crossover player is really important, especially in what I do. And my first love is jazz. It always will be there in my heart. And so I don't listen to a lot of orchestral music because I'm always listening to jazz. And Al's main mentor was Clifford Brown, and he was the sound he heard in his head when he's playing. He is the sound he hears in his head when he's playing.
Right.
But I think Al sounds like kind of a mix between Clifford, Lee Morgan, and Freddie Hubbard. Like if you could put those three together,
Nice.
he's got
Right.
this like this Lee Morgan like swagger, you know, when he plays, and it's cool because he and I think have similar personalities in that we're a little bit like behind the scenes, kind of easily in the shadows and happily in the shadows. But when he pulls out his trumpet, Al can just like lay it down like no one else. And if you don't know who he is, look him up immediately.
I'm going to add about Al Hood too that I play with him in Summit Brass, and Al Hood it might be the best trumpet player nobody knows.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And he's fine with that too.
Yeah.
I know. He's just. I mean,
Yeah.
he played the Tyzik Vizzuti Concerto one summer with Summit, nailed it, and then later that concert played the piccolo part on the Pines of Rome or something. I don't remember what it was, and he sounded like Phil Smith on piccolo. It was just like,
Oh my gosh.
I hate this guy.
Yeah,
Right.
you
Totally.
can't because he's the
Yeah.
nicest person
Yeah,
alive. So
right.
I sort of try to model myself after Al in a lot of ways, personally and professionally. So
No, it makes sense. That's a great role model for sure. Well, guys, I'm gonna say this has been a total treat for me. Thank you all for being on this panel, and we covered a lot of really great topics, and it's nice to hear so many perspectives. And again, like some of the roles that you guys do overlap, and some are different, and you're in different orchestras throughout the country, and some of you play together. I mean, it's a really nice kind of assortment of what our orchestral trumpet playing community is. So thank you all for being a part of this tonight. I really, really appreciate it.
thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Of
nice.
course. And of course, we'll all keep our fingers crossed for what will be next in our orchestral communities too. But you're all incredible players, and I've seen a lot of practicing videos coming out from everybody. So it's nice to still get to hear you play. So, but thanks for joining us tonight, and thanks to everybody for tuning in for this episode of Shires TV. Next week, it's going to be something a little bit different. It's going to be myself and my colleague James Monahan, maybe a couple other guests. We're going to do a factory tour and kind of talk about some instrument building questions. The tour, I think we're going to record it a little bit ahead of time, just so that it's not 8 p.m. and walking around in a, closed factory. But so we'll get that queued up, and then we'll just be able to start answering questions about what different things do when we're building instruments and all that kind of fun, geeky, nerdy stuff. So tune in for that too. But thanks again to everybody for watching. Thanks for everybody who is a panelist tonight, and happy practicing, and everybody stay safe.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Bye guys, thanks so much. Bye.